What's going on, guys? Welcome back to DIY guitar making. Here at Eric Schaefer Guitars, we have just finished up the spring acoustic guitar build workshops. I want to thank everyone who came out. We had Ed, Brian, Loring, Anthony, and Chris all came out to build guitars with me. I learned a lot from just being with them, and I don't know, hopefully they learned something from me too. But the spring classes are done now, so I can commit myself back to building the guitars that I'm building, both as commissioned builds, and there's a couple that I'm building just for fun for myself as well. And I'm going to be making videos, of course, as we are right here all along the way, to show you guys some cool stuff about guitars, which I know you like. And yeah, I'm not sure where I was going with that. Just wanted to cue you guys into the fact that I'm back making videos. What I have right in front of me right now is guitar number 106, which I'm building for David in California. And I don't exactly know what I'm going to be working on today, and that's simply because there's a number of things that I could be working on at this point. There's the inlays and the fretboard. Pretty cool fretboard, right? That's Macassar ebony. There's gluing the head plate. I probably will do that today. Maybe I'll shape the heel cap, get started shaping the bridge. All kinds of cool stuff we could do. But it's all a process, and we're going to get into it. So why don't we start where we are right now. I'm going to show you some of the materials I have here just because they're interesting. First of all, as I mentioned, I have a lot of Macassar ebony here for the fretboard, the head plate, the bridge, and the heel cap. Oh, and the end wedge as well back here. That is also Macassar ebony. Cool thing about Macassar ebony is it really has the same properties as any other ebony, gaboon ebony, etc. But it also just aesthetically has this cool caramel striping. These brownish colors that just really add something to it. And so aside from that, we're going to be using Honduran mahogany for the neck, which is really, Honduran mahogany is just the gold standard for neck woods. There's not much of a reason to experiment with other types of necks, although people will use maple, and I've used Port Orford cedar, but in general, Honduran mahogany is just the king. So over here, this actually has the same color tone as the mahogany, but really this is actually rosewood with some cool sapwood in here. Sort of an unusually light color for rosewood, but really rosewood, East Indian rosewood does have a, oh I'm sorry, I misspoke, not East Indian, Nicaraguan rosewood. This is Nicaraguan rosewood. But regardless, whether it's East Indian or Nicaraguan, there's actually a pretty broad spectrum of colors that you can end up with when you're sourcing that wood. Often, as many of you may be aware, rosewood looks very purplish, kind of like a mixture of blacks and purples all together. This is really oranges and browns. Kind of has a cool sandstone kind of look to it. And we've got the Rosette here, which also has that same Nicaraguan rosewood material in there. It's actually scraps from the offcuts of the back itself. So taken straight from the back plate wood. The top is Western red cedar. Yeah. It's not Sitka spruce. Okay, so that's where I'm at right now. The body I'm actually going to put aside for now. There's nothing I can do with it at the moment, and that's simply because I'm actually waiting on an order I placed with Gurian Instruments. They produce various inlay marquetry materials, purfling, binding, stuff like that. I placed a hefty order of bindings from them, and I'm waiting to receive them. They're a busy place, so I'm on a little bit of a back order, and I don't want to get started with the binding until I have those materials, because They're those bindings are custom sized for this particular guitar. Anyway, so we're going to put that to the side. Such is the reality of working or running a business, and you know, in this kind of gig here of guitar making, where sometimes you're just waiting and you have to be sort of agile enough to be able to move, and adaptable, I guess is the word, to be able to move to something else while you're waiting for materials to come in, or new tooling, or if you take your bandsaw into the shop to get worked on or something like that. Sometimes you just gotta stall and work on something else in the meantime. All right, so we're gonna turn our attention. And anyway, I get really good at doing that over time because I have to do that a lot, actually. And so we're turning our attention to putting in the inlay dots, the heel cap, and the head plate, and maybe even the bridge. I know I just named a lot of things there. Obviously, I'm not going to get all that done today. I'm probably going to get very little of it done today, because I actually have to get home today because it's my son's birthday. So later on today, I've got a party to attend. So before we install the head plate, it's good to have an understanding of what tuners we're going to use, and therefore what our overall thickness between both the headstock piece here of mahogany and the head plate is going to be. When we add these two together, what's it going to be, so that we don't undershoot or exceed the maximum thickness that's allowed for these Steinberger gearless tuners. I've talked about these tuners here on the channel a bazillion times at this point, so you guys are sick of hearing about them. But I will say real quick that they're just a different concept of a tuning machine. They actually pull the string straight down into this shaft. They're gearless, and they have the equivalent of a 40-to-1 tuning ratio, which simply means that they have super smooth tuning accuracy. It's really easy to incrementally just inch up on as precise of a tuning as you can possibly get, rather than tuners that have a really poor tuning ratio, like, I don't know, 4-to-1 or something like that. Those are going to be really difficult to get into tune and to stay in tune. Anyway, they're cool. So this has a, at least they state on their own sort of product materials, that this has a maximum headstock thickness, requires a maximum headstock thickness of 43/64, and a minimum is a 1/2 inch. Okay, this is already cut to a 1/2 inch right here, so this would be a minimum headstock thickness to be able to use this. And actually, with the inclusion of the head plate at the moment right now, I am at 670 thousandths of an inch, which is almost exactly 43/64. By the way, I did not just do that math in my own head. That is something I did off camera a minute ago. So don't be too impressed with me there. So what I want to do right now, this would just barely work as a maximum thickness. I'm going to reduce the thickness of the head plate just a little bit. You may, by the way, notice that this head plate is very, very chunky and oversized compared to what you're probably used to looking at. Head plates are often called head plate veneers because they're thin like a veneer. But what I like to do a lot of the times is use a nice chunky piece of wood for the head plate. I think aesthetically it really just adds something to the headstock to have this. You almost have like the equivalent of a binding strip on the side when you view it like this, right? You get that nice black line along the side instead of something very, very thin like a veneer would be. But beyond aesthetics, also it provides a really strong, secure backstop for the nut, much more so than just a wimpy veneer of wood would allow. Alright, so let's go ahead and thin this out just a little bit more, because I don't want to be right at the maximum thickness. I want to shoot for a little bit lower than that, just so I don't run into any problems. Okay, so now we've got 50, I'm sorry, 650, yeah, 650, so we lost 20 thousandths of an inch off of there, and that's good. I still like that it has a chunkiness to it, like I mentioned, and I may actually countersink, I'm not sure yet, I may actually countersink the tuner heads slightly into the headstock, which is something I've done on other guitars and really liked, but we'll just see a little bit later. I have a lot of head plate here to do that with, so I have some optionality, so I'm just going to keep that open for now. Now I have an option here where I can either try and keep this cool little swirly patch right there. I don't know if you can see when the daylight hits this. You can see the outline of the headstock that I've drawn on here. So we'll get just a little chunk of that material right there, which I think looks super cool, but if I get too much of it, and especially it bleeding onto the edge of the outline, it might kind of look weird as it blends in with the mahogany. So I'm going to check out what this looks like if I slide my template up a little bit so that I exclude more of that brown there. Honestly, I think that might be the way to go. Again, just because the color of that caramel is so close to the color of the mahogany that it might actually be a little off-putting to see it right on the edge there. But we got options here, so let's take a look at them. Wild grain like this does look really cool, and trust me, I'm a fan of it. I like to accentuate the weirdness of the wood as much as I can, but just from experience you find that there are certain situations like the one I just described where the wood that's going to be adjacent to it is going to look very similar to it. Then there are situations where you want to actually there's just ways that can backfire on you, having that crazy grain. So that actually looks pretty cool. There's still a little highlight in the corner, enough to see that something's going on there. Oh, and we have a little crack right here, so I might want to avoid that as well, although I can always fill that with black super glue and that'll just disappear. Honestly, I might shoot for the middle of these two things, kind of in between, because there's also a case to be made for if you have too little of this wild grain here, that cool stuff. If you have too little of it, it also looks kind of weird. You need to have enough so that your eye's not confused by it. Anyway, this is the kind of stuff that goes through my head. Also, I might be overthinking it. So I'm going to pick something and I'm going to move on here. Alright, so I've got that pinned in place. My hole's drilled. See that? And now I simply add glue and clamp the hell out of this thing. Okay, time to work on this guy right here. We are going to be installing Abalone. Check those little guys out. Abalone face dots and Abalone side dots as well, as per the request of David, who I'm building this guitar for. He wanted to do the Abalone instead of the mother of pearl. So I'll show you what the two look like. I usually use something that looks kind of like this. I like the gold mother of pearl. It's really all the same animal, by the way. When you get gold mother of pearl or green mother of pearl, black mother of pearl, white mother of pearl, it's just different sections of the same shell of the same species of animal. Now abalone is something entirely different though. That's a different shell, different animal, and different look, really. I mean, it's kind of crazy looking, and kind of this iridescent rainbow color with some dark strands throughout. I like abalone a lot, actually, so I'm really happy that he requested this just to kind of break me out of my standard thing that I was doing with the mother of pearl. So check these out. I mean, this just looks wild. Obviously, I'm not gonna... Here, let's install them like this. That'll look good. Obviously, I'm not gonna throw them randomly on here like this, but I just wanted to show you what they looked like against the actual fretboard. Wow, this one almost looks like mother of pearl here. I might not use that one, but that's why I got extra. There's a little tip for you, by the way. Always order extra. Yeah, this one looks good. Not on that face. And if you like a particular face, the interesting thing is once you sand it even slightly, you'll see something totally different, just one layer deeper down. So sometimes you'll be pleasantly surprised by that, or maybe even disappointed when you sand some of these back if you were expecting to maintain a very specific color pattern on one of these. So I'm gonna mark and drill these holes. I wanted to show you the abalone, but actually I won't be installing these until way later, after the fretboard is attached to both the neck blank and the sound box. That's when I actually like to glue the dots in, because that's when I will be leveling the fretboard in place. But I wanted to bring them out to show you because we're going to drill those dots right now. Now when we do the side dots, we're actually going to install those completely. So I've got some cool little abalone side dots here, and we don't need to wait to install those. We can do that right away. Alright, so here's I just used this old fretboard here as a template to remind me which frets I'm doing, which are the 5th, the 7th, the double dot at 7th, the 9th, and the double dot at the 12th. I could do the 15 and the 17, those are commonly done, but I don't want to. I want to keep this fairly sparse, just the 5, 7, 9, and 12. Some people like to do the 3 as well. Once again, I'm not going to do that. It's not necessary. It's really not necessary for the musician even to find their place, because we will have all those dots, the 3rd, the 15, the 17, and the ones that I just mentioned that I'm doing on the face. All of those will be well filled out on the side, which is more for the musician back here. The face dots, kind of for the musician, but also it's a little bit for the audience as well. That's just something to keep in mind. You really don't have to fill out the face as much as you think, as long as you're filling out the side.
So first, to locate my fret marker dots, all I have to do is draw X's in the fret spaces. The center of the X marks the spot where I want to drill. Using a Forstner bit leaves a flat bottom to your inlay pocket for the mother of pearl or the abalone to rest against. Okay, now we can turn our attention to the side dots, which will also be abalone. The first thing I'm doing is I'm using a preset marking gauge to score a single straight line along the side of the fretboard. On this line, I can inlay all of my dots. I just now have to find the centers between the appropriate fret spaces. Once I've punched out all my dot locations with an awl, I can use a hand drill to drill out the holes, install the dots using a hammer and a small hard block to tap them into place, and then finally apply some water-thin super glue.
All right, now let's go ahead and sand this back. Only takes a second here on a nice flat sanding board. And I could have clamped this down, but hey, we're done already. Well, almost. Wow, look at that. That's pretty cool. So there's some glue shadow that's still there, but I'm not worried about that. This is all going to get sanded further when I carve the neck. But I just really wanted to see, was excited to see how that abalone comes out on the black and the caramel of the Macassar ebony. That's cool. Okay, and here we are back at the headstock here. I've removed all the clamps, obviously. And we just have this lip here that I always leave when I glue these down. There's this lip that we have to cut back to reveal the true back edge of the nut slot. And the way that I do that, I'm going to show you. I have a nifty little jig here. You see this jig has a little undercut cut into the bottom of this surface so that I can slide this right up over however much overhang that I have, which allows me then, because there's a fence keeping me flush against the side of the neck blank, and this is square to that fence, I can take a saw, a dovetail saw, in this case I'm going to use a carcass saw, and I can cut right on that line and it will be square, both square in this direction, but also, most importantly, it's going to be square, straight up and down, to the fretboard bearing surface of the neck. Okay, and here comes the lawnmower, guys, so it's going to get loud. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and cut this.
First, I have to plane the headplate material flush with the side of the neck blank in order to draw out some lines so that I can trace a square line across the top of the headplate so I have something to align the jig with.
when I cut this, I have to actually watch what I'm doing because there's really nothing stopping me from going right into the mahogany, and I don't want to do that. So I'm just creeping up down to the bottom of the ebony and stopping with just a razor thin margin of ebony left, so I can then just break off that overhanging piece and clean up the remaining bit with a file. But again, it's with a big toothy saw like this, it's really easy to just get carried away and dig into the mahogany going a little too far. I've definitely done that before, so I'm not going to do it here. Starting to get real close now, so I'm going to slow down and just pay attention to what I'm doing. Okay, that looks good. We'll just pop that off with the chisel. Listen carefully. Basically just wedging it up and not actually using the cutting edge of the chisel, just the wedge shape to kind of pop that off. And there it is. Alright, I've got my headstock shape drawn onto my neck blank here, and I'm ready to cut this out and shape it right down to those lines. The process ultimately is going to look like this. I'm going to first make some big bandsaw cuts just to relieve most of the material. Then I can take it over to the spindle sander to shape it real close to the line, and then finally I'm going to finish this up on the robo sander, which is really like finishing it up with a flush trim router bit. Many of you may be familiar with routing in that fashion and shaping your headstocks in that fashion with a router bit. However, on a curvy, skinny headstock like this, it is just fraught with danger and tear out and other kinds of difficulty to use a router bit here, especially since I have such a thick ebony plate on the front, and that's just going to be I don't know, pretty disastrous on a router bit, again with these curves and the changing grain direction. So what the robo sander is it's basically the abrasive equivalent of a flush trim router bit. And you know what, here it is, just because I like to explain things with props. So if you know what a flush trim router bit looks like, you've got your cutter and then a bearing on the top so that that bearing can run against your template and duplicate things to that template perfectly. This does the same thing, but it's held in a drill press, and instead of a cutter which can dig in and tear out and get angry and throw the workpiece and chop off fingers and all kinds of chaos, an abrasive sleeve isn't going to do any of that. So it's a lot safer, it's a lot less temperamental on your workpiece. So I really like to use it in kind of tight, dicey situations with changing grain direction, as we find here on this headstock shape. Alright, so this is all the time I have dedicated in the shop for myself for this guitar today, so I'm going to end it right here, and I'll do all that shaping and all that fun stuff the next time. So see you guys in the next one. Bye for now.
If you learned something here, please give this video a like and subscribe so you can be notified when I release a new DIY guitar making video. And if you want to really learn more, take one of my structured online courses at ericschaferguitars.com or register for a hands-on guitar building workshop here with me in Burnville, Pennsylvania.